Dear students, today I will be discussing about nutritional importance of carbohydrate. This video is created as a part of module 1, which mainly discusses on nutritional importance of carbohydrates, proteins and lipids. So I will be dealing only with the nutritional aspects of carbohydrates. This is a part of a value added course which is being organized and started by Department of Biochemistry, mainly on nutrition in diabetes mellitus. So myself, Dr. Asha Rani, Professor and Head, Department of Biochemistry, Adi Chunchandgiri Institute of Medical Sciences, will be telling you about the importance of carbohydrates. So these are the specific learning objectives of this session. At the end of this session or the video, after watching this, you will be able to define the carbohydrates, classify carbohydrates, the regular classification, the composition and significance of some of the physiologically important carbohydrates. Mainly, you should know about the definition and classification of dry dietary fibers with examples and their beneficial effects. So first and foremost, let us see what are carbohydrates. So carbohydrates, if you go by the book definition, they are nothing but the polyhydroxy. That means they will have many OH groups of aldehydes or ketones, or any compounds which gives these on hydrolysis. So all are grouped under a broad macronutrient, that is carbohydrates. Normally they are classified as monosaccharides. Some of the things can be clubbed as oligosaccharides and polysaccharides. So this classification is mainly based on the number of sugar units present in each carbohydrates. If a single sugar unit is there, they are all classified as monosaccharides. They are all simple sugars. For example, glucose, fructose, mannose, galactose. Coming to oligosaccharides, these are the carbohydrates which are short chain and comprises of 2 to 10 monosaccharide units. So for example, we have sucrose, which is a disaccharide, lactose, which is a disaccharide. The third and final classification is polysaccharides. So poly means many. So any carbohydrates which have more than 10 monosaccharide units in them, they are all grouped as poly. And based on what is this 10 or more than 10 is made up of, if they are same type of monosaccharide, they are also called as homopolysaccharides, and if they have different types of monosaccharides, they are called as heteropolysaccharides. So we will not go in depth of these things. Just remember the polysaccharides, they are all complex carbohydrates. For example, the starch, glycogen, cellulose, etc. And starch is a plant source, glycogen is a animal source. Now we will see the functions or why we require these macromolecule carbohydrates. The main or the important function of these carbohydrates are to provide us energy. So they provide 4 kilocalories per gram of carbohydrates, whatever we consume. And keep it in mind that the total energy, whatever we want, 65%, up to 65% should come from carbohydrates. And the main source of energy is the glucose. Some cells like RBCs or central nervous tissues, they solely depend on carbohydrates for their energy sources. And these carbohydrates are also structural component of many organisms. And if you look at the cell membrane compositions, yes, the cell membrane also has carbohydrates, especially they are bound to either lipids or proteins. That's why they will be in the form of either glycolipids or glycoproteins. And the variety of the carbohydrates, the type of carbohydrate we store in our body is glycogen. So glycogen is an animal source and starch is in plant. So plants store energy in this form of starch, and we store glucose as glycogen. And whenever we require glucose for the body functioning, we convert glycogen into glucose. So any excess carbohydrates we consume, they are all converted into fat especially the triacylglycerol, and they're stored in adipose tissue. So this is the main function of carbohydrates if you see. Coming to how much we require, as already I have mentioned, so our total calorie requirement, out of that 55 to 65% should come from carbohydrates. And as I have told, the calorie released, or the energy released by these carbohydrates, are 4 kilocalories per gram of carbohydrates. And a normal adult may require somewhere around 300 to 350 or maximum up to 400 grams per day. This is very important. The major part of energy should come from carbohydrates, so that the proteins, the structural components of our body, are spared. Otherwise all proteins will get utilized for energy purpose. So that's about the general part of our introduction to carbohydrates. But whenever we are talking about a course in nutrition in diabetes, so you should know what is this carbohydrate doing in diabetes. So for that, let me categorize this the carbohydrates based on their dietary function. So these carbohydrates can be classified or categorized as available or digestible carbohydrates. For example, all the monosaccharides, all the disaccharides, they all grouped under these. Some of the complex, the polysaccharides, they all will come under this digestible. That means we can, when we eat these type of carbohydrates, we can digest because we have enzymes for that, and they can be converted into glucose, and that can be used for several functions in the body. So for digestive carbohydrates, the main sources are the vegetables, the whole grains, cereals, legumes, potatoes, what. So they are the chief source of energy. The second type, or the category of these dietary carbohydrates, are unavailable carbohydrates, otherwise known as undigestible or dietary fibers. So these are very important whenever we talk about nutrition in diabetes. So the dietary fibers. So some of the dietary fibers, they are soluble and some are insoluble. So whatever might be, the dietary fibers are not digested by us because we lack enzymes to digest. For example, cellulose, hemicellulose, pectins, gums, mucilages, lignin, etc. So these are all some of the examples for dietary fibers. So what are the dietary sources? How we can consume or get these dietary sources? So examples, you can eat oats, the cereals, unpolished rice, sprouts, fruits and vegetables. So all these are rich in undigestible or unavailable carbohydrates also. So even though they are not digestible, unavailable, why we are talking about? So because they have lot of beneficial effects in our body, and also they are very important whenever we manage diabetes mellitus with nutritional adjustment. So how much we have to consume? The dietary allowance per day is maximum up to 30 grams per day you can consume. Coming to the importance or beneficial role of these dietary fibers. So first and foremost, they are undigestible, so you cannot digest. So they add to the bulk to the stools. So they prevent constipation mainly by increasing the intestinal motility, and also they absorb lot of water, and they add bulk to the stools, and thereby they prevent constipation. In diabetes, how they are helpful? They improve the glucose tolerance, mainly by increasing the insulin sensitivity. That's why it is recommended in diabetes mellitus management to consume dietary fibers. They also have a lipid lowering effect, mainly by inhibiting the absorption or decreasing the absorption of cholesterols, and thereby they are also involved in decreasing the risk of cardiovascular diseases. So as these dietary fibers give the sense of fullness, that is satiety, so and also they have that long-term weight management role. So they are also involved in effective management of obesity. So any person who are mainly focusing on reducing their body weight in diabetes or non-diabetic, it's good to consume a little bit of more dietary fibers. And these dietary fibers, they also have a very good bacterial removing bacterial toxins removing effect. So because of this function of them, they are also having beneficial effect in preventing cancers, especially in colon cancers, because our gut has many bacteria and they release many toxins in the gut, and these are all removed by dietary fibers. So it is very, very important to include the dietary fibers in our regular diet. So we have seen the beneficial effects, but keep a note, too much is always too bad. So if you consume a large quantity of fibers, they also have some adverse effects because they inhibit this absorption process. So if you consume lot along with cholesterol, they also will inhibit the absorption of fat soluble vitamins. They also will inhibit the absorption of many minerals and proteins. That's why we have to moderate the consumption of dietary fibers. The dietary allowance or recommended allowance is up to 30 grams per day. Coming to the key points of the importance of the carbohydrates, the largely consumed carbohydrate is glucose as a part of starch or glycogen. So starch is a plant source, glycogen is animal source. So we consume, Indians, the staple food is rice. So the whatever rice we eat, it is finally digested to glucose. And do remember, very important, this glucose is because it is a main source of energy, and many tissues like RBCs or central nervous tissues, they mainly depend on glucose for its energy source. So whenever we have an impairment of this glucose metabolism, where it leads to increased glucose content in the blood, leading to a disease called as diabetes mellitus. So on an average, a normal blood or a random plasma glucose, if you see, we should maintain somewhere around 70 to 100. So anything above that in fasting, more than 126 milligram per deciliter, or in postprandial more than 200 milligram per deciliter, we can say they are categorized as diabetes. So very, very important to moderate the consumption of glucose, and also to utilize to the maximum these glucose whatever we consume. Next is the sucrose, the sugar, the sweetener we consume. It's nothing but sucrose, a disaccharide. So if you don't moderate this, again it leads to synthesis of many lipids, and also it is one of the important factor in obesity, metabolic syndrome, and tooth decay in children's. So coming to starch and glycogen, whatever we consume, finally they are converted to glucose. So again, glucose, you should know, we should moderate the consumption of these carbohydrates. Anything excess is dangerous. So we have a mechanism in the body. If you consume lot of carbohydrates, they are converted into triacylglycerols and stored in adipose tissue. So that's about the nutritional importance of carbohydrates. Mainly in diabetes, if we are concentrating, we have to make sure that we should take the diets which have low glycemic index, and also we should increase our dietary fibers in the diets. That's how we can manage the diabetes mellitus through nutrition. Anyway, in a few future modules, you will learn about the glycemic index of these foods and how to moderate and what are the foods we have to take. So I think with this we have completed the set objectives in the initial part of this session. Thank you.